Thank you very much, Chairman. Let me start by disagreeing with the notion that what took place with respect to the cases against President Trump was weaponization. I know that's the Republican theory of the case, but the other reason why the FBI and the Department of Justice would investigate Trump for crimes is because Trump was doing crimes, and there was adequate predication to pursue investigation of those crimes. And indeed, in every case that I'm aware of in which those cases were allowed to go to judgment, the president was convicted. So we can't allow the weaponization narrative to just remove the notion that the guy was investigated and prosecuted for crimes because he did the crimes. Once you start with the notion that Trump is not a criminal but a victim, you then have to invent the conspiracy that victimized him. And once you've propagated that conspiracy, you then have to find who the conspirators are. So then you have to go after FBI agents and DOJ folks in order to prop up that theory. The way that ended in Soviet Russia was with show trials of the individuals who were allegedly in the conspiracy. The way that ends in Trump's America is with agents and prosecutors forced out in mass purges that may well, as the ranking member Durbin has pointed out, been driven by Kash Patel as a private citizen. So starting with that point, there are three reasons why Kash Patel is extremely dangerous. One is all of his wild MAGA behavior. This is a guy whose judgment is beyond questionable. It's appallingly bad. We have a lot of quarrel about whether his enemies list is an enemies list and whether we're smearing the guy by saying that his enemies list is an enemies list. Here's what he said about it. He showed his enemies list and said, "The manhunt starts tomorrow." If they're not your enemies, why would you start a manhunt against them? He called them the criminals themselves and showed a picture of his enemies list. If criminals aren't your enemies, as head of the FBI, who are? He retweeted a video showing him chainsawing the heads off of people on his enemies list. If you're chainsawing the heads off of people, are they not your enemies? So the invention that this is not an enemies list requires people to go into just fantasy land. And these are his own statements. These aren't our accusations. These are Patel's own words. Going after people in the media, impeaching judges who disagree with us, shutting down the FBI Hoover building, on and on and on. This guy is a flagrant extremist with appallingly bad judgment. Second point, we don't know enough about this mischief yet. There are real open questions. We've never in this committee had a person come for a serious senior law enforcement position who had testified in a grand jury criminal matter, and we don't know what he testified about. He's entitled to tell us. That's basic grand jury Rule 6E law. But this side of the committee is completely covering that up. We have absolutely no statement from Patel about what his grand jury testimony was. And he's at liberty to give that to us. He just won't. And Republicans won't tell him to. So he gets away with it. He pled the fifth. You don't get to plead the fifth without a real and genuine concern that you can be prosecuted for a crime. What crime? We're entitled to know. We've never had somebody come through this committee for a high senior law enforcement position who had pled the fifth. He's got the right to do that, of course. We've got the right to know. And by the way, when he exercises the right to do that in a civil proceeding, that entitles the jury to draw the adverse inference that what he is covering up in the civil proceeding with his Fifth Amendment assertion is against his interests. A judge will instruct a jury about that adverse interest. And we're not supposed to draw an adverse interest in this committee when we're not told about his Fifth Amendment assertion. There's all this weird stuff that's come up since about investments in Chinese companies in the Cayman Islands vesting while he will be FBI director. If the guy is supposed to be investigating Chinese intrusion into our intelligence faculties, if we're trying to investigate Chinese fentanyl trafficking into our country? Why do we want an FBI director who is somewhere between $1 and $5 million into a Chinese company through a Cayman Islands shell? And then there are the Russia connections.
What we just watched in that hearing wasn't a partisan squabble. It was a moment when the thin fabric of American accountability was pulled back, and we got a glimpse of what's really happening behind the curtain. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse didn't just deliver a speech. He issued a warning. And if you were paying attention, that warning was about the collapse of a standard that used to define American governance, the idea that truth still matters. Because when a man like Patel, now sitting at the helm of the FBI, can lie under oath to Congress and face